Welcome to everyone who is not in the studio. We are at Yoga Samadhi. Hopefully you can tell from the title. And it's great to actually sit with live people. There's a fair number of people here, so about 10 of us from the local community. That feels really nice. And also happy to have all of you who are joining us. It's definitely, it's a nice effort that people have actually come out here. We're wearing masks. It's not exactly comfortable. And I'm not doing it to try to make you contemplate dukkha, but there it is, you know. It's always present for us in one way or another. So what we'll start with tonight is we'll do a guided meditation for about a half an hour, and then we'll take a short stretch your legs break, and then I'll give a short reflection, and then if there's time we'll do a question and answer. And are they saying that okay, wow, it's a miracle. All right, so we'll start with a meditation here. So just closing your eyes. Feeling your body, the experience of having a body. Feeling the temperature around you, feeling of warmth, coolness. Might be a sense of stuffiness if you're wearing a mask. I thought I'd lead you tonight in what's called a preliminary Tibetan practice. This is something that Lumpur Pasno suggested to me, and I sometimes practice this before a meditation or as part of the meditation to start with. So we start with focusing on our breath. Settle the mind. You're looking for that comfortable experience you can have while you're observing your own breathing. There's a lot of thinking going on. You can add the word in on the in-breath and out on the out-breath. Or you can say bud on the in-breath and do on the out-breath, or the opposite. can say rising, falling. For some people it's helpful to count 10 in and out breaths. Move on to recollecting our refuge in the Triple Gem, the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. You can ask yourself what that means to go for refuge, to seek safety in. In recollecting the Buddha, we recollect his qualities. Kindness, compassion, wisdom, his enlightenment. We recollect the Dhamma, the truth, seeing with clarity, the eloquent teachings. The reminders that point us to awakening. And recollect the Sangha, our refuge in the Sangha. Refuge in those beings who have also realized awakening, realized Nibbana. This is the noble Sangha. You can also recollect the monastic Sangha, the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis. You can also take a larger view of the Fourfold Assembly. These are all the students of the Buddha, the monks, the nuns, all the lay people, lay women, lay men. A larger family of practitioners. bring up the idea of what the Tibetans called bodhicitta, that is the awakened mind. So your sense of what it is to be awakened. These can be also expressed as aspirations that you have. For your practice, for your own mind. These can also be the benefits that you have received through your own practice. So the next step is inviting your teacher to meditate with you. Or if you have a teacher, then you have a sense of welcoming him or her to sit with you. To be present with you, their qualities to be present with you. The next step is thinking in gratitude to your teacher. generating a feeling of thankfulness, gratitude, appreciation. It's called Katanyu Katawedi in Pali. Rejoicing in the goodness that's been done. The next step is to clean your conscience from any unwholesomeness which has been done. This is something you might bring up that's specific, but it's also can be ordinary and recent. One of the important aspects of recollecting a regret is that it is used as a teaching, not as a force of berating oneself. It's a reminder of what we don't want to do again. It's not a reminder of ourselves, our personhood, as flawed. It's a reminder of an acknowledgement. A mistake was made. And there's an intention not to do it again. Next is to recollect and rejoice in the good that you have done. This is a specific recollection, specific good actions that you have done, and rejoicing in them, acknowledging them. Learning from them. So next we want to rejoice in others' virtues or good actions, specific virtues and actions that you've noticed. Next, we want to ask for teachings, not just verbal teachings from teachers, but also from others, from situations. So this is an invitation to bring teachings in from your life. finally, there's a request to ask teachers to stay in the world and close to you. So this could be the Buddha, this could be actual teachers that you have, spiritual benefactors, guides, those who have helped you in your life. So it's a request that they stay in the world and they stay close to you. Well, it feels really nice to see all of you again in person. Almost the exact same group as I saw you last in July here. Sans masks. Of course, I'm connected to all of you through my stomach, or most of you, so there's also that connection, which is quite beautiful. It's not only my stomach, it's also my mind and my body, my ability to live as a monk. I'm also very happy that you get to see Ajahn Cunda and Ajahn Titapanyo every week. That's very nice. One of the themes that I've been thinking of is how important it is to take in what the Buddha calls delighting in our actions. A little bit of what we were recollecting in the meditation, where in terms of right effort, we're specifically delighting in developing and we're also delighting in letting go. We're delighting in letting go of unwholesome traits, and we're delighting in developing wholesome traits, wholesome actions of body, speech, and mind. And that's of course, that's very obvious that we'd want to do that, but I find it in my own practice, it's not always that obvious in terms of how I generate it, or I bring it up. And it comes back to what I've been mentioning on the live stream a lot, is just that taking that sense of joy in what we're doing, that as we're engaging with our practice, with the mind, with the Buddhist teachings, it's not supposed to be drudgery and dukkha and negativity, and there's an enjoyment, there's a joy that we can partake in. And part of the problem is often that we associate effort and difficulty with stress, and often I think it's because we can be trained in seeing sort of the negative rather than the positive of the result of when we're letting go, when we're developing. So as you were meditating during this guided meditation, were there, you can ask yourself if were there moments of this delight, such as recollecting your own good actions? Were there ways that you were able to access that easily? And if not, what do you think the cause of that is? If we're not delighting in developing, then we're not going to want to develop. It's that simple. It's sort of, if you aren't enjoying what you're doing, if you're not happy, the mind's not going to be inclined to do it. So there needs to be a way that we discover, or we work with, or we figure out how to enjoy, how to take delight, how to love letting go, how to delight in we're developing the teachings of the Buddha, we're developing our own minds, something like integrity. Today, I mean, just a very simple thing happened this morning. It's just a moment. But I was sitting in meditation, and I started to sit out with this timer, and I put it up to a pretty long sit. It was like almost 3 hours, and I did move during that sit. But as the 3 hours were going, I kept saying. It took a while, but towards the end of the sit, I was saying, "Oh, come on, just look at the clock, just what time is it? You're going to be late. You might be late for the monks coming back from alms round. They're going to think you're neglecting your duties, or just, what time is it? How much time is left?" And I was saying, no, it's fine. So I went back and forth with this. Not a huge thing. Some of you may have experienced this yourself. And I just refused to kind of go with the mind that was having to know. This sense of when I know how much time is left, or I know that I'm not going to be late, and I had set the timer so I wouldn't be late, so, but then there was this doubt, or this sense well, how do you know the timer's still working? Technology definitely hasn't always worked before. What are the other monks going to think? And my own sense was also that whenever I have looked at the time left, I usually compromise then. Oh, well, there's 15 minutes. oh, it's kind of, maybe in 7 minutes I'll finish. And so just knowing that own tendency, then I just kept saying that to myself, just, no, I'm not going to look, just stay with the breath, stay with the body, stay with the experience. And then the bell rang. And I just could feel in my body this joy, just from just that sense of, oh, I said I was going to do something, I did it. I didn't listen to essentially what the Buddha calls Mara, that voice within us that is tempting us to give in to our just base desires. It doesn't have to be good for us in the long run. It just gets a little bit of satisfaction here. But then also that knowledge that, well, it's not actually going to be a benefit. It's going to be something that's going to hinder me. I'm going to look, I'm going to start compromising, or I'm going to feel bad that I did look. And the whole point of that is just that determination, that was a development. It was also a letting go. But when the bell rang, there was just this happiness that occurred. Not only because, I just sat a while, didn't get up, but stayed with what I said I'd do, but the feeling of sticking with a determination, it feels really good, because we can often sabotage ourselves. It's very easy to sabotage ourselves. And so there's a delight in that, a delight in saying, oh, I conquered Mara, I conquered my own mind for a moment, even if it's just this one thing I didn't do. It's kind of like, if you've ever been in a situation with someone you know, it could be a spouse, it could be a coworker, it could be anyone, sister, brother, friend, and you got into some sort of discussion where there was some advice given, and you said, if you follow my advice, it'll work out okay. And they were adamant about following their own advice. This could also be children. And then they followed their own advice, and they made every mistake you said that they would make. And so they're kind of either admitting this to you, or you found out about it, and so maybe you want to say, do you remember what I said to you? And there's a sense of kind of they're revealing themselves to you, that they've made this mistake. And so in your mind, you might really want to say that. In fact, you might be angry. You say, like, how many times have I told you and you don't listen and keep making the same mistakes? So whatever it is, you're there, and then but then there's this voice that says, wait a minute, I've done this many times before. I've said to somebody, look, you should have listened to me. I was right, you were wrong. And you say, oh, that, you might say to yourself, that never works. It's never helpful. The other person doesn't appreciate it. They feel judged, and they don't gain in trust. They sort of lose trust because you're holding something over them, right? You're sort of, let me tell you what's important here is that I'm right, and you better listen to me in the future. Sort of wagging your finger. So you don't say that, and then there is a feeling of once you've conquered that desire not to say something, it feels really good. It's just that same feeling. It's like, oh, Mara, I see you. That's how the Buddha or his disciples would often say. Just the seeing of that temptation, the seeing of that voice that isn't skillful, isn't helpful. And so in the same point, you're letting go of that, and you're developing this good quality of, wait a minute, like, what can I do instead? Maybe I can listen. And I can say, oh yeah, that is pretty rough. That is difficult. I know what you mean. And then you walk away, and it's that same feeling. It's like there can be a real feeling of happiness and delight that arises out of that. And what's important is that we remind ourselves of that, just like we did in the meditation, where we actually bring up these thoughts so that we rise up in our own minds, and that actually creates not only the tendency to keep repeating these actions, but it also creates a sense of buoying in the practice, like, oh yeah, this is kind of keeps us going forward, keeps us moving and interested. And I've found that energetically it's quite positive. So that's where these recollections can be quite helpful. We rejoicing in our own actions. We rejoice in others' actions. We rejoice in our, what teachers, our guides have done for us. These are all really helpful to the mind. And so they set us on a course of having a very good and meditation, a workable meditation, meaning like the mind is workable, it becomes malleable, it becomes easy to use, easy to see your own defilements, easy to see your hindrances and not move in their direction, because you know that you have stopped moving in that direction before and you can do it again. So it's a confidence builder as well. That's how determinations, when we determine something, we say we're not going to move in a particular direction, and we stay, we stand our ground, and that allows us to keep doing that in the future, and it also feels really good. It's that delighting. So we do that, as I've said in our meditation as well. We're facing hindrances, difficulties with perhaps greed or wanting something to go our way. You might be here right now and you might say, is this really worth it? I'm wearing this mask. It's kind of like cold at the same time and having trouble breathing. I could just be at home listening to the live stream. So much easier. Maybe Ajahn Cunda will listen to the mask mandate and just 10 more days, 11. Won't that be wonderful? And, if we listen to that voice, that movement of mind, then, where does it take us? It takes us into our own desires for what we want. My way, my sense of comfort. And there's no argument, obviously. It's nicer to not wear a mask. And, but we deal with the world. We deal with living in samsara. And we can also recollect, well, I'm not in Ukraine right now. So we can gain a perspective as well, oh, being in this room is a lot better than being in Ukraine. So is wearing a mask. And this isn't, painting the world, a rosy pink and trying to just create, make yourself happy with all of with some difficulty you have, but it is a good way to balance the mind, develop the mind in terms of balancing it with perspective, that it's not just all about us, it's not, even being here isn't all about us, supporting your local community, supporting each other being here. So, yeah, just kind of working on that sense of how you can see in the mind a way that you can develop that happiness, that delight, that rejoicing in your own goodness. I was mentioning those two words before, katanyu katawedi, which basically means like acknowledging what's been done and how important that is. If you have, someone in your life who acknowledges something that you've done, how does that feel to you? It's pretty good feeling. And it's interesting that we often don't do that for ourselves. And so it's really important that we try to bring that around for us, that appreciation for what we're doing, the goodness that we bring to the world, the goodness that we bring to ourselves. And when we do that, then there is a sense of kind of moving in the right direction, moving away from the actions that we know that are not good for ourselves or others. And so we gain momentum, and it's very helpful. So yeah, those are just some words of reflection. And again, I'm very happy to see all of you here. It's very nice to not just see your food, also see your faces. I mean, they get the extra benefit of seeing you. Did anybody have any interesting experience that they'd like to mention or talk about, especially with the meditation? I don't know how many of you have tried that. It is a preliminary meditation, so it's not supposed to last a half an hour. It's usually like a warm-up exercise. So those answers to those questions or what you're bringing up, or maybe it's 5-10 minutes or something, 15 minutes. And in the Tibetan tradition, there's a focus on the guru, the teacher, which is also pretty strong in our tradition, but it's a little bit stronger with them. So that's why several of the points mention that. Anybody? Uh-oh, there goes the screen. I didn't oh, okay, saved it. Yes, Shelley?
Yeah, it was interesting with your meditation guided, thinking about bringing up teachers, and it was a new experience for me. I was really surprised that, I thought, again, so teachers, who are my teachers? Well, I know some of the monks that I just really, 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 really admire. And then so why is that? What is that quality? And it made me kind of like, what is that about Ajahn X? And it was very useful, just very useful. I hadn't really looked at it that way, because I don't have to say what it is. And I find myself shy to say, well, my teacher, because they don't maybe know they're my teacher. My teacher. Maybe they do. And it was just very useful that I hadn't really looked at it that way before. What is it about this particular teacher that is inspiring to me? Exactly what is that? And so I kind of had to go down that trail. But that was okay, because this was a contemplation meditation. So I appreciate that. And yeah. And then I had some question come up, and it's probably question came up. Stuff comes up. And I was going to ask you this question, and it's okay if you say, no, this isn't relevant, but I was curious about the levels of wanting. Tanha, upadana, desire, liking, and it occurred to me, well, it's a continual thing. It's not like you go from one, there's not a gap. It's like, so there's the story about Ajahn Cunda, who says, when the women come to the monastery when he's with Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah asks him, what do you think, Sumedho? And he says, well, I like, but I don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems useful to think about it that way. wanting versus liking. Do you have an idea what I'm getting at
In terms of intellectually understanding it, or do you mean?
like, okay, this is Buddhana, or this is just I want strongly.
Yeah, there's. I mean, in the. I was talking to Ajahn Cunda the other day. You know how you've heard this expression how like certain people have their languages extend to encompass words or different things in different ways. So like people who live in freezing temperatures often, or like most of the year, whatever it is, people who are in the Arctic Circle or wherever, they have many different words for the cold and the snow and different kinds of snow. And in Buddhism, there's so many different words describing desire. You said upadana, craving. And so there are a lot of ways that actually the Buddha talks about many nuances of what he means by desire, greed, longing, clinging. I mean, it's just, it kind of moves, in this way. So, the way that we practice is kind of to like elucidate what it is that we're understanding from our own experience. And so you are, kind of searching, you are looking, like, what is this, the meaning of, what is the cause of this, what is the meaning of this, what is the feeling of this, how do I differentiate it? And we are, in a sense, differentiating our sense of like what we know from these Four Noble Truths, like what does the Buddha really mean by it? And so you would be wanting to kind of have a look and differentiate, like what is the difference between liking and wanting? Why did Lumpur Sumedho make make something out of that? And so, it's an interesting question, because somebody, after hearing that, might say, I mean, I don't know how many of you have questioned that. Like, what is, he was in that situation. Does everybody know that story? The Lumpur Sumedho was sitting in front of, with Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah was talking to a bunch of, I think they were nurses. Anyway, there were a bunch of young women. And after they were finished, Lumpur Cha just turned, he's very direct, and he just turned to Tan Sumedho at the time, very junior monk, 1 or 2 Vasa, and he said, did you like that? And do you remember, what did you say, Shelley? His response was?
He said, I like, but I don't want.
Yeah, that's right. He says, I like it, but I don't want it. And so that's a very good contemplation. And then Ajahn Chah, I guess, went for a week talking about what Lumpur Sumedho had said. Because there's a nuance to that. There's something different between wanting, which is like craving, I have to have that, or just acknowledging that you like something. Just like you like a sweet flavor that comes up. You like it. But if you don't want it, then you're not craving after it. You're not trying to get it. So that's kind of the nuance or the difference, as I understand it. Is you acknowledge yourself, I like something, but I don't want to get it. And yeah, that's kind of important to kind of think about these things, bring them up, understand them. So Ajahn Titapanya right now could say that he likes computers, but he doesn't want them, because his computer screen has gone completely blank. So he can't actually see the questions anymore that any of you are posting. Our Chromebook has just died. You could try and turn it on and off again, but anyway.
So is there anything specific, tanha versus upadana? Because it seems like they're used a lot, but are they interchangeable?
Well, they're just different descriptions, but yeah, tanha, desire. You can also say it's like a sense of sense desire. And clinging, clinging is just we're holding on to something. We have to have it. We have to keep it. To know it. So yeah, they are different refinements of feelings we have, of what we want, what we're trying to have. There's different causes for them. They have sometimes different links along the dependent origination chain. So there's sort of cycles for how we move with our desire. So anyway, that's just one aspect of kind of what you're saying. But again, it's important not to get too attached to the words that the Buddha has. We're always looking at our own experience. And if we're kind of getting into, is that upadana? Is that upadana? And you're asking yourself is that, or sorry, just let me say clearly, is that clinging? How do I know that's clinging? I mean, it's a good question to ask yourself. How do you know something is clinging? But sometimes then our minds just start spinning around, what does the Buddha mean by this? I don't know what's going on, or what did this teacher say? It doesn't make sense. So we also want to kind of watch our mind kind of spin around these topics and see, remember that, it's kind of basic what we're doing. We want to try to keep it simple if we can. But it does get nuanced when the mind gets quiet. You start to see things a little more clearly, possibly. Yeah.
Too much meditation.
No, I don't think too much meditation. I mean, the Buddha has this thing where he talks about mismeditating, over-meditating, premeditating, which is a very funny sutta. Yeah. Okay, Ajahn Titapanya is trying to come back online. Anybody here have any other things they want to say? Anything that was helpful or not? Or
I thought it was just nice to reflect on all the kind things people had done for me or my family today, and I realized there were so many just little things, like a neighbor took my daughter out to ice cream, and a friend, talked with me and smiled with me, and just all those little things, all in one day. There were so many.
yeah, there are. We often miss them. Our minds cannot often for, and so our minds are based on what it is that we condition them, into. And so, if we're teaching ourselves to look for, the negative, then we will see the negative. And if we're teaching ourselves to look for, the wholesomeness, wholesome traits, then that's what we'll see. But it's not easy. It's not I don't think most people are born into just being positive and seeing the good things. It's because that's not what's dangerous. We are alerted to what is worrisome, dangerous, what's going on here. That's why we love the news, It's what's going on? Tell me what's wrong. We don't turn on the news and say, tell me what's right today. I can't wait to hear what's right today. And which is unfortunate, because it's much nicer to hear what's right than what's wrong. But it's I also am curious, Colleen, if you had an easy time saying the same thing about yourself, though, because there was the same recollection about your own good actions.
Yeah, I reflected on that the same time. I appreciate that too, because those are also easy to lose sight of. I think we can all be so self-critical, or we can think about what we could have done better, what we did wrong. So.
Yeah, especially the better part. It's oh yeah, I helped my daughter today. That was really nice. But I could have done a little bit more for her, because I should have maybe helped her a little bit more. It's just rarely good enough. And sometimes it's good to be able to also say, no, it's good enough. Because we can, sometimes when people are really depressed, they'll say, oh, I'm just a terrible person, and then you can ask them, well, did you kill anybody today? Did you steal from anybody? Abuse anybody? And it's good to have, a relative sense of well, we're doing pretty good, actually, a lot of the time. But yeah, we hold a heavy weight over our heads. It's easy to do that. And, you know, and especially culturally, it can be easier in certain cultures. That's just sort of the normal way of doing things. There's a question.
Well, there's
Okay.
multiple. There's one particular which is on the topic of meditation.
Okay.
From Holly Griswold.
Yep.
Asking teachers to stay in the world and stay close to me was unexpectedly emotional, powerful. Maybe it is about noting my dependence, giving into that. Your comments, Ajahn?
Giving into her dependence.
Maybe it's about noting my dependence, comma, giving into that.
Giving into her dependence. Yeah. So the question or the statement was about, you know, wanting to keep teachers in the world with me and close to me, as when we were recollecting that in the meditation, and that brought up an emotional response. But maybe, and that possibly it was having to do with dependence, feeling dependent. Huh? It's okay, you can read it. Well, I think it's a normal response to have an emotional sense of like the fragility of the fact that we can't rely on the fact that we are going to have teachers close, and we're not going to have them necessarily in the world with us. And there's a dependence on that. You know, we want to have people who can help guide us. We want to have spiritual friendships. We want to have, you know, just imagine like that just all, you know, everybody you know who kind of practices with you is gone. They've disappeared. And that, you know, that's a difficult thing to bring in. That's, you know, as the Buddha talks about, it's the whole of the practice, the whole of the holy life. So, you know, we do need to acknowledge also the support that we give each other in our practice, and the support that, you know, those who we have faith in give us, our teachers. And there is a dependence on that. It's not something that we're not attached to. But I also want to quote one of our teachers who said that, you know, it's actually can be a good attachment. A lot of times people bring in the Buddhist teachings and they say, oh, you can't be attached to anything, don't want to be attached to teachers. But sometimes being attached to a teacher can be a good attachment to have, and then you can let go of that attachment much later. But it's a useful thing because you say, oh, I want to grow close to this person, I want to have this person around, I don't want to take advantage of the fact that they might not be around. And so some of these attachments can be quite good and helpful. It's important, like with a lot of the Buddhist teachings, you don't want to, the expression, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to be careful of like how much we kind of put the teachings at an extreme state, like, well, everything is emptiness, so none of you really exist, and well, there's no really reason to acknowledge any of you, even my family members. They're just, you know, elements. So that's not really a good way to practice. People won't even be inspired to be around you. That's what you have a sense of. So yeah, I think there's it's not necessarily a bad thing to have that come up and to have that emotional response. I think that's a good thing. Anything else there?
Yeah, there's multiple questions. One from, but they're not on the topic. Is that
That's okay.
okay? Bhavani Chandrasekhar, Namaste. How to deal with life when people deceive us to whom we helped?
People who deceive us to whom we've helped. How to deal with that? Well, it's sort of it's sort of a fact of life that we're going to be disappointed in other people, and they can be those who are close to us or those who are not so close to us. They just we have certain expectations, and especially the more we know someone, the closer we are to someone, then the higher those expectations are. And that means that the higher the disappointments are when someone does something that is harmful to us, like deceiving us. So one is just to acknowledge that disappointment, to acknowledge that, okay, well, it's natural because I have an expectation, or I've had a sense that this person hasn't done it before, or I put trust into this person, I've helped this person. So yeah, there's an acknowledgement of that, and just also just to say, yeah, it is painful when we have helped others and then they take advantage of us in one way or another. So to understand that from a point of dukkha, that's, that is being separated from what we love. That's what sort of the core of the Buddhist teaching. But then we can also move to a sense of compassion. Recognizing that deception does cause so much harm, it's important to see that whoever has harmed us in that way, they're having to face the repercussions of that, the karma of that. In one way or another, it might not be now, but it's something that they have to face. So we also want to try to come from a sense of compassion, like, oh, deception, and rejoice in our own sense that we don't deceive others, but also to say, oh, that's really sad for that person. They're going to be having to face consequences of that deception, and one might be that you're no longer friends with them, or you're no longer wanting to associate with them, or you lose trust. I've reflected on the fact that when you trust in someone who has never lied to you, there is an incredible sense of weight that gives. As soon as somebody lies to you, it doesn't mean that you can't ever trust them again, but you can, as a human being, you can acknowledge people make mistakes and these things. But if you've ever been around somebody who's never lied, and then they lie, like that, the Buddha really holds that as a very high expression of good action when we don't lie. And when somebody does do that, there's no going back anymore. That person has irrevocably changed your perception of them. It's just a never quality. They can never lie again, but you will always have a sense of, but they lied that once, so they are capable of doing it again. And that's why the Buddha said that somebody who lies, who continually lies, there's no evil they cannot do. Because if somebody continually lies, then what are they doing? Well, they're just going to start believing in their own lies. And they're not going to know good from bad anymore. They're just going to continue to tell themselves their own lies. And so the Buddha really puts this as, you can see it. It's in the 4 precepts. It's in the Parajika rule for the monks. So if any monk actually says, I have certain attainments that they don't have, if they say they're enlightened, or they say they dwell in certain states of samadhi or whatever, and they don't, and they know they're lying, the Buddha said that's it. They're not a monk. A nun, same thing, not a nun, and they can't become a monk or a nun again. Doesn't mean they can't practice, but and they could become a novice, but they can't. They've lost the what it actually means to be a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni. That's how kind of serious he puts that line. He calls it. He says, if you do that, if you lie about your own supernatural attainment, it is as if you have stolen the food from the lay people. That's how he talks about it. That you're stealing from them, because they're given to you out of faith, and they're giving you out of faith, and you lie to them about what their faith that they have in you, and this is a lie. Then you're actually stealing that food. So he sees it as a pretty heinous thing. So anyway, just coming back to that question, we have to deal with these disappointments in terms of deception, and people do deceive, and just to balance out our own sense of what's, like, how much do you trust people? How much do you put that in? It's important, but it's also to say, like, yeah, this is what happens when you trust someone, or someone is trustworthy and you've helped them. And the natural result is you feel separation, pain, anxiety, remorse, sadness, feeling taken advantage of. So just be careful with your own trust and your expectations. Anything else there? Do you have anything you want to say? As it possible. What else? Anything?
Satvika asks, can monks grow your own food if civilization is destroyed?
Well, that happened with like the Mahayana monks in China. They went through a famine, and they ended up growing their own food. The Buddha has certain allowances, but then he kind of changed those allowances in his own lifetime. So one of his allowances was the famine allowance, that one of the things we're allowed to do in a famine is, like, we can get fruit. This doesn't seem like it's that super helpful, but we can get fruit, and then we can take it off the ground if it's fallen and it doesn't belong to somebody, so we're not stealing it. So it's pretty specific. And then I can go up to Colleen and I can say, I put the fruit down in front of her and I say, if that was offered, I could eat it. Which, and so the point is that Colleen could say, well, that's great, because I'm going to eat it. Thanks for getting it to me. It's a famine. But the point is that's pretty specific. So the Buddha doesn't allow a lot of leeway in terms of what happens if there's, if civilization falls apart. I mean, I guess you could say there's a condition for being a monk or a nun, and there's not. So there might not be the supporting conditions anymore. It isn't though a disrobing offense if you grow your own food. So it's not, one could still maintain being a monk or a nun, but that's not what we do, is kind of like engage in offenses that aren't that serious and kind of say, well, they're not that serious. So we're still taught not to do it. Lumpur Pasna would say, it's probably not helpful to engage too much in speculative questions. So I think it's more fruitful to kind of deal with, like, what's going on now. What's that? Yeah. Anything else?
Somebody sing Johar. What is the sound of silence? Is that an essential part of one's growing deep in meditation? Is it part of one of the stages of enlightenment?
Okay, what is the sound of silence that is essential? Is it part of enlightenment? No, it's just a meditation technique. And the sound of silence is what Lumpur Sumedho, Ajahn have developed. Some describe it as just tinnitus, still ringing in the ear, and you just listen to that. And it's called the sound of silence. I would say it's interesting for me, that expression, because that's what I thought it actually was. So as I was growing up, I would be in silent situations, out in nature, and when the wind was quiet, I would hear this high-pitched noise, and I thought it was just something coming from the earth or something I didn't know. It was coming from me. So it is the sound of silence. It's just an inner ringing or inner thing that some people hear, other people don't, and other people who claim they don't, and eventually sometimes they do. And it's not at all essential or necessary for enlightenment, or even necessarily recommended as, for some people don't even recommend it as a meditation object, but I found it useful, I use it. Yeah. Yeah, good. So is that, anybody have anything else to add? Questions, comments, interests? I think many of you know that Ajahn Cunda is coming back. I think I announced that. April the plan is the evening of April 3rd, and there's a monk coming up here. The plan is on April 1st, named Tan Tisaro. I think he's been a monk for 3 years. And he's coming up here, and then the monk on my far left is staying as well for the spring, Ajahn Cunda. Yeah, so those are the monks who'll be here for the springtime. As we say, inshallah, God willing. That was one of Ajahn Amro's favorite expressions. I didn't know what it meant for a long time. Thought he was speaking Pali or something. And that's about the going-ons of the monastery. We're enjoying our winter retreat. We're well fed. Don't worry about us not being well fed. Some of us work on not overeating. So yeah, we're just enjoying the fruits of the holy life and being able to be monks and living with your kindness and giving and generosity. So, in many ways, not just through food. Coming here as well. Yeah, very good to see all of you. And we'll keep this up, and we'll probably keep wearing masks, just for our time here. And Ajahn Cunda will figure out what he wants to do. But there's a request for ride offerings. If some of you are able to give rides ever, then that's helpful. Anna is organizing those rides, so if any of you have time to participate in that, that's helpful. I know some of you already do, so if you can give a ride, that's helpful. And we do have the weekends open. We have opened up the weekends, just so all of you know. So if you want to come by, come on by, and you can. I don't think so. I mean, I think we've opened up in the sense that it's helpful to tell the Dana coordinator, but it's not a requisite. So we've already had people showing up, and we're opening the windows and in the house, and people are closing them, and so yeah, we're taking the precautions that we can, wearing masks. But maybe pretty soon we'll be able to, it's getting to be about 50 degrees by about 11 or 12, so we can start going outside a little bit. And it dries a bit more. Okay, well, I forgot to get the chanting books out, so I think we'll forego a chant. We'll try that next week maybe. Good to see you all, and yeah, very happy to be here.
Sure nice to share the evening with all of them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for coming.